The courtroom fell silent the moment the bailiff's fist connected with her jaw. Attorney Kesha Washington's blood splattered across the marble floor of Jefferson County Courthouse, a crimson punctuation mark in a sentence that had been written years before. But what looked like one man's rage was actually the death rattle of an empire. In 60 seconds, everything Judge Marcus Thompson had built would begin to crumble. This is the story of the punch that brought down a kingdom. Stay until the end and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights of Courtroom 7B hummed with the same indifferent drone they'd maintained for 32 years. Kesha Washington had learned to hate that sound. It was the soundtrack to injustice, steady, unchanging, deliberately deaf to the cries of those seeking truth within these walls. She adjusted the collar of her navy blazer, feeling the weight of the briefcase in her left hand. Inside that worn leather case was enough evidence to shake Jefferson County to its foundations. But first, she had to get it admitted into evidence. First, she had to get past Judge Marcus Thompson. All rise for the Honorable Judge Marcus Thompson. The voice belonged to Derek Miller, head bailiff of Jefferson County Courthouse. 6'4", 230 pounds of blind loyalty and calculated intimidation. His uniform was always pristine, his badge always polished to a mirror shine. Kesha had watched him escort dozens of defendants out of this courtroom, some guilty, many not. He moved with the confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. He was wrong. Judge Thompson entered from his chambers, black robes flowing behind him like a cape. At 63, he cut an imposing figure, silver-haired, square-jawed, with eyes that could freeze water. 28 years on the bench had carved lines into his face, but they weren't the lines of wisdom. They were the lines of a man who'd spent decades bending the law to his will. "Be seated," Thompson commanded, settling into his chair as if it were a throne. The gallery was unusually full for a Tuesday morning hearing. Kesha counted at least 15 reporters' cameras ready. Word had gotten out that she was making a play today. The media loved her young brilliant, unafraid to call out the system's failures. They dubbed her the conscience of Jefferson County after she'd overturned 3 wrongful convictions in 18 months. Thompson hated her for it. Case number 2024 CR 8847, the clerk announced. The People versus Jamal Henderson. Defense motion to introduce new evidence. Kesha rose her heels, clicking against the hardwood floor as she approached the bench. Behind her, shackled to his chair, sat Jamal Henderson, 22 years old. Engineering student. Son, brother, nephew. Accused of armed robbery based on testimony from a single eyewitness who'd later recanted. Thompson had refused to hear the recantation. "Your Honor." Kesha began, her voice clear and steady. "I'm here this morning to—" "I've read your motion, Counselor," Thompson interrupted, not looking up from the papers before him. "And I'm inclined to deny it." "With respect, Your Honor, you haven't heard what I have to present." Now Thompson looked up, his eyes locked onto hers with the intensity of a predator spotting wounded prey. "I don't need to hear it. Your track record in my courtroom speaks for itself. You come in here with 11th-hour evidence crying misconduct, trying to make a name for yourself at the expense of law and order." Kesha felt her pulse quicken, but kept her voice level. "Your Honor, I have physical evidence, witness testimony, and documentation that will prove beyond any doubt that my client is innocent, and that this court has been—" "Careful, Ms. Washington." Thompson's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried through the entire courtroom. "You're treading on very thin ice." "I'm treading on the truth, Your Honor." Kesha opened her briefcase, pulling out a manila folder. "I have here sworn affidavits from 3 individuals who were present at—" "Bailiff Miller," Thompson said, suddenly cutting her off mid-sentence. "Please approach the bench." Derek Miller moved with the practiced ease of someone who'd performed this dance before. He climbed the steps to the judge's bench, and Thompson leaned in, whispering something Kesha couldn't hear. But she saw Miller's jaw tighten, saw his hands clench into fists. Something was wrong. Your Honor. Kesha pressed forward. I also have financial records that show a pattern of... Ms. Washington, you are in contempt of this court, Thompson declared, his voice rising. I am ordering you to sit down immediately. I haven't done anything to warrant contempt, Your Honor. I'm simply trying to present evidence in defense of my client. You're trying to derail these proceedings with wild accusations and conspiracy theories. They're not theories when I have proof. Kesha pulled out another folder, this one thick with documents. Bank statements showing regular deposits to your offshore account from... The courtroom erupted. Reporters lunged forward. The prosecutor shot to his feet, and Judge Thompson's face went from red to purple. That's enough, Thompson roared, slamming his gavel. Bailiff Miller, remove this woman from my courtroom immediately. Miller descended the steps, moving toward Kesha with purpose. But she stood her ground, holding up the documents. These records show payments totaling over $2.3 million over the past 6 years, Kesha called out, projecting her voice to reach the gallery. Payments made by defendants in cases where Judge Thompson showed unusual leniency despite overwhelming evidence of guilt. Payments that coincide with... I said remove her, Thompson bellowed. Miller grabbed Kesha's arm, his grip bruising. Let's go, counselor. Take your hands off me, Kesha said firmly, trying to pull away. I have a right to present evidence. I have a right to defend my client. You have the right to be silent, Miller growled, yanking her toward the aisle. The documents scattered from her hands, fluttering to the floor like wounded birds. Kesha twisted, trying to break free, and that's when she saw it, the look in Miller's eyes. Not anger, not frustration. Fear. Pure, desperate fear. Your Honor, this is assault, Kesha shouted. I'm an officer of this court, and I'm being... Miller's fist connected with her jaw before she could finish the sentence. The impact was devastating. Kesha felt her head snap to the side, felt her teeth cut into her cheek, felt the metallic taste of blood fill her mouth. She stumbled backward, her vision exploding into stars, and crashed into the defense table. The sound of her body hitting wood echoed through the suddenly silent courtroom. For 3 eternal seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then chaos erupted. Oh my God. Did you see that? Call 911. Are you getting this? Tell me you're getting this. Cameras clicked and flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions. The prosecutor stood frozen, mouth agape. Jamal Henderson struggled against his shackles, shouting something Kesha couldn't make out through the ringing in her ears. She touched her face. Her fingers came away red. Judge Thompson rose from his bench, but he wasn't looking at Kesha. He was looking at the cameras, at the reporters, at the evidence scattered across his courtroom floor like accusations made manifest. Clear this courtroom, he said, but his voice had lost its thunder. Bailiff Miller, I said clear. No. Kesha pushed herself up, using the table for support. Blood dripped from her split lip onto her white blouse, but she didn't care. Her briefcase had fallen open, and more documents had spilled out. She reached for them with shaking hands. No one is clearing anything. Ms. Washington, you need medical attention, Thompson said, and for the first time, Kesha heard something unexpected in his voice: panic. Bailiff Miller, call for an ambulance. This was clearly an accident, a misunderstanding. It was assault, Kesha said clearly, picking up a document with bloody fingers. Witnessed by 47 people and recorded by at least a dozen cameras, and it was intentional. She turned to face the gallery, holding up the paper. A photographer's flash illuminated the blood on her face, and she knew that image would be on every news site in the country within the hour. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, she said, her voice steady despite the pain radiating through her skull. What you just witnessed wasn't an outburst of anger. It was desperation. Judge Marcus Thompson ordered his bailiff to assault me because I was about to expose a corruption scheme that has been operating in Jefferson County for over 6 years. That's a lie, Thompson shouted. Ms. Washington, you are mentally unstable. You're making wild allegations because you're losing your case. Bailiff Miller, escort her out before... Before what? Kesha challenged. Before I tell them about the 12 defendants who paid you to fix their cases. Before I show them the offshore accounts. Before I play the recordings. Thompson went very still. Recordings? Kesha reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. Her hand was shaking, but she kept her grip firm. 3 months ago, a retired courthouse clerk named Margaret Chen came to my office. She'd worked here for 38 years. She'd seen things, heard things, and she couldn't stay silent anymore. She gave me access to the courthouse's old phone system, the one no one thought to check because everyone assumed it was disconnected. She held up the recorder. It wasn't disconnected, and judges don't always remember to watch what they say when they think no one's listening. The color drained from Thompson's face. You're bluffing. Am I? Kesha's finger hovered over the play button. Should I play the conversation from March 15th? The one where you told Miller and I, quote, the Washington woman is getting too close. We need to handle it. Or maybe the one from April 22nd, where you discussed payment arrangements with defense attorney Robert Callahan. Or how about, stop? Thompson's voice cracked. He gripped the bench, his knuckles white. Everyone out, now. This courtroom is adjourned. This courtroom is a crime scene, a new voice declared from the back. Every head turned. 3 people stood in the doorway of courtroom 7B. The woman in front wore a navy pantsuit and carried credentials that identified her as FBI Special Agent Patricia Davis. Behind her stood 2 U.S. Marshals' hands resting on their sidearms. Agent Davis walked down the aisle with the confidence of someone who'd seen this play out 100 times before. She glanced at Kesha, taking in the blood, the bruising already forming on her jaw. Ms. Washington, I'm Special Agent Davis. We've been investigating Judge Thompson for the past 8 months. I'm going to need you to hand over that recording. Gladly. Kesha pressed the recorder into Davis's hand. I have copies, multiple copies, and witnesses, and documentation. I have everything. Davis nodded, then turned to face the bench. Judge Marcus Thompson, you are under arrest for judicial corruption, bribery, racketeering, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. You have the right to remain silent. This is outrageous, Thompson exploded. I am a judge of this court. You can't just... You were a judge, Davis corrected. Derek Miller, you are also under arrest for assault, battery, conspiracy, and accessory to corruption. Both of you need to come down from there, now. Miller looked at Thompson. Thompson looked at Miller. And in that moment, Kesha saw 32 years of carefully constructed lies begin to crumble. Thompson tried one last time. I want my attorney. You'll get one, Davis said evenly. Though I suspect your usual attorney might be unavailable, seeing as how Robert Callahan was arrested approximately 45 minutes ago. The gasp from the prosecutor's table told Kesha everything she needed to know. They hadn't known. The district attorney's office had been kept in the dark about the full scope of the investigation. Your Honor, I mean Mr. Thompson, the prosecutor stammered. What's going on? What's going on? Agent Davis said, pulling out a thick manila envelope from her jacket. Is that we have evidence of systematic corruption involving at least 12 public officials in Jefferson County. It's all here. Bank records, wiretaps, testimony from 6 cooperating witnesses. And now, thanks to Ms. Washington's investigation, we have even more. She turned to Kesha. You should have come to us first. I tried, Kesha said quietly. 3 months ago, I filed a report with the FBI field office. I never heard back. Davis's jaw tightened. That report was intercepted by someone in our office who's now also under investigation. I'm sorry. If we'd received it. If you'd received it, Jamal Henderson might not have spent 6 months in jail for a crime he didn't commit. Kesha walked over to where Jamal sat, still shackled, tears streaming down his face. It's over, she told him softly. You're going home. Ms. Washington. Jamal's voice broke. I thought I thought I was going to prison for 20 years for something I didn't do. I know, but you're not. Because the truth matters. Because justice matters. Even when it's hard. Even when it's dangerous. Even when it gets you punched in the face by a corrupt bailiff. A strange sound filled the courtroom, laughter mixed with tears. Jamal was laughing and crying at the same time, and Kesha felt her own eyes begin to burn. But she didn't have time for tears, not yet. The U.S. Marshals were handcuffing Thompson and Miller, reading them their rights. Reporters were shouting questions, their cameras capturing every moment. And Agent Davis was looking at Kesha with an expression somewhere between admiration and concern. "You need to go to the hospital," Davis said. "I need to see this through," Kesha replied. "Ms. Washington." "Kesha. And I'm not leaving until Jamal's release order is signed." Davis studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but after that hospital, non-negotiable." As the marshals led Thompson and Miller out of the courtroom, Thompson turned back one last time. His eyes found Kesha's, and she saw something in them she'd never seen before: fear. "You have no idea what you've done," he said quietly. "No idea how deep this goes." "Then I guess I'll keep digging," Kesha replied. Thompson laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You think this ends with me? I'm just one judge in one courthouse in one county. You think we're the only ones? You're so naive. They're going to bury you for this. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but—" "Move along," the marshal ordered, cutting him off. But Thompson's words hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Agent Davis approached Kesha as the courtroom slowly emptied. "He's trying to scare you." "Is he succeeding?" Davis smiled grimly. "Maybe a little. But between you and me, we've been building cases in 3 other counties." Thompson wasn't lying about the scope of this, but he was wrong about one thing. "What's that?" "They're not going to bury you. We're going to need you. Everything you found, every document you collected, every witness you interviewed, it's all going to be crucial to this investigation. You just became the star witness in what might be the biggest judicial corruption case in U.S. history." Kesha felt the weight of those words settle onto her already bruised shoulders. Behind her, Jamal was being unshackled. In front of her, Agent Davis was looking at her with an expression that said, "Welcome to the fight of your life." "I need to call my mama," Kesha said suddenly. And despite everything, despite the pain and the blood and the weight of what was coming, she laughed. "She's going to lose her mind when she sees me on the news with a busted lip." "Go call your mama," Davis said gently. "And then we'll get you to that hospital. Tomorrow morning, I'll need you to come to the FBI field office. We have a lot to talk about." As Kesha walked out of courtroom 7B, past the reporters shouting questions, past the scattered documents that had changed everything, past the blood still drying on the marble floor, she felt something unexpected: hope. The system was broken, but it wasn't destroyed. Not yet. Not as long as there were people willing to fight for what was right, even when that fight left you bleeding on a courtroom floor. Outside, the October sun was shining. The marble steps of the courthouse gleamed white and clean, as if they'd never witnessed corruption, as if justice had always lived here. Kesha sat down on those steps, pulled out her phone, and dialed her mother's number. "Baby?" Her mother's voice was warm and familiar. "Aren't you supposed to be in court?" "I was," Kesha said, touching her swollen jaw gingerly. "Mama, I need to tell you something, and I need you not to panic." "Kesha Marie Washington, what did you do?" Despite everything, Kesha smiled. "I told the truth, and then I got punched in the face by a bailiff." The scream that came through the phone was probably heard 3 blocks away. But as Kesha sat there feeling the sun on her face, and the pain in her jaw, and the weight of what she'd set in motion, she thought about Jamal Henderson. About the other innocent people sitting in cells because judges had been paid to ignore evidence. About Margaret Chen, the retired clerk, who'd risked everything to give her access to those phone records. about the truth. And she knew with absolute certainty that it had been worth it. Every bruise, every risk, every terrifying moment when she'd thought she might not walk out of that courtroom alive. Worth it. The punch that had seemed designed to silence her had instead become the spark that would burn down an empire of corruption. And this was only the beginning. The emergency room at Jefferson County General Hospital smelled like antiseptic and bad coffee. Kesha sat on a paper-covered examination table, her mother, Diane Washington, gripping her hand so tightly it almost hurt more than her jaw. Almost. "How many times do I have to tell you?" Diane whispered fiercely, her eyes red from crying. "You can't save the world if you're dead, baby." "I'm not dead, Mama. It's just a busted lip." "Just a busted lip, Kesha. That man could have killed you." Diane touched her daughter's face with trembling fingers, careful to avoid the massive bruise spreading across her jaw like a storm cloud. "What if he'd hit you harder? What if—" But he didn't. Kesha squeezed her mother's hand. And now 47 witnesses and a dozen cameras recorded a bailiff assaulting an attorney in open court. Thompson's finished. The curtain pulled back, and a young doctor entered, followed by someone Kesha hadn't expected to see, Agent Patricia Davis. "Washington," the doctor said, shining a light in her eyes. "I'm Dr. Patel. Follow the light for me, please." "Good. Any dizziness, nausea, blurred vision?" "No, I'm fine. Really." "You're not fine," Dr. Patel said matter-of-factly. "You have a grade 2 concussion, a fractured cheekbone, and you needed 8 stitches in your lip. You're going to be in significant pain for the next several days." Agent Davis stepped forward. "Doctor, how long before she can give a statement?" "She can give a statement now if she insists on being stubborn, which I suspect she will. But she needs rest. Real rest." "I'll rest when this is over," Kesha said. Diane made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "That's my girl. Stubborn as her daddy, God rest his soul." Agent Davis waited until Dr. Patel left before pulling up a chair. "Mrs. Washington, would you mind giving us a few minutes?" "I'm not going anywhere," Diane said firmly. "Whatever you need to say to my daughter, you can say in front of me." Davis nodded, respecting the boundary. "Fair enough. Kesha, we need to talk about what happens next. Judge Thompson and Derek Miller are in federal custody, but they're not talking. Not yet. However, we've executed search warrants on Thompson's home, his chambers, and 3 properties he owns under shell companies." "What did you find?" Kesha asked. "Everything." Davis pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos. Financial records going back 8 years. Correspondence with defense attorneys arranging payment schedules. A ledger documenting every bribe, every fixed case, every arrangement. He kept records of his own crimes like he was running a legitimate business. Why would he do that? Insurance. Leverage. If anyone tried to take him down, he had evidence on them too. Mutually assured destruction. Davis looked up from her phone. The problem is, Thompson wasn't the top of the food chain. He was middle management. The words hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. "How far up does this go?" Kesha asked quietly. "We're still mapping the network, but based on the documents we've recovered, it involves at least 4 other counties, 2 appellate judges, and we've found evidence suggesting connections to organized crime families in Chicago and Detroit." Diane gasped. "Sweet Jesus!" Kesha felt her stomach turn. "You're telling me I just kicked a hornet's nest?" "I'm telling you that you just handed us the key to dismantling a criminal enterprise that's been corrupting the justice system for over a decade." Davis leaned forward. "But yes, you also made yourself a target. These people have money, power, and connections. They will come after you." "Let them come," Kesha said, but her voice wavered slightly. "Kesha Marie," Diane warned. Agent Davis shook her head. "Brave words, but this isn't a movie. These people don't play fair. They don't have rules. We've already intercepted 3 threatening messages sent to your office in the last 2 hours. We're monitoring your phone, your email, your apartment building." "You're scaring my daughter," Diane said sharply. "Good. She should be scared. Fear keeps you alive." Davis softened slightly. "But she should also know she's not alone. The Bureau is offering you protective custody until we can determine the full scope of the threat." "No," Kesha said immediately. "Kesha, no, I'm not hiding. I'm not running. If I disappear now, everyone will think I made it up, that I was the crazy lawyer making wild accusations. I need to be visible. I need to show them that I'm not afraid." "Even if you are afraid?" Davis asked gently. "Especially then." The two women looked at each other, and something passed between them, an understanding shared by those who'd chosen to fight battles they might not win. "All right," Davis said finally, "but you're getting a security detail whether you like it or not. 2 agents 24/7 until we determine otherwise." Diane exhaled in relief. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Kesha, there's something else you need to know. We arrested Robert Callahan this morning, like I mentioned. He started talking within 2 hours. And what he told us." Davis paused, choosing her words carefully. "Do you know why Judge Thompson reacted so strongly when you mentioned the recordings today?" "Because they incriminated him." "Partially. But also because one of those recordings involves a conversation about you specifically. Thompson and Miller discussing how to neutralize the Washington problem. That assault today wasn't spontaneous, Kesha. It was premeditated. Miller was supposed to make it look like you became hysterical, attacked him first, giving him justification to subdue you with force." The hospital room felt suddenly cold. "But I didn't attack him," Kesha whispered. "We know. The cameras prove it. But if there hadn't been cameras, if the reporters hadn't been there, the narrative would have been very different. Thompson would have claimed you became unstable, violent. Your evidence would have been dismissed. Your reputation destroyed. And you—" Davis didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. "They were going to kill her," Diane said, her voice breaking. "That's what you're saying. They were going to kill my baby and make it look like self-defense." "We believe that was a possible outcome, yes." Kesha touched her stitched lip, feeling the pull of the thread, the throb of broken bone beneath bruised skin. She'd known the risks theoretically, but hearing them laid out so plainly made them real in a way that turned her blood to ice. "I want to see the recordings," she said. "All of them. I want to know exactly what they said. Kesha, I want to hear them planning to hurt me. I want to hear it in their own voices. Because when I testify, when I stand in front of a grand jury or a trial jury or whoever I need to stand in front of, I need to know exactly what I'm fighting against." Davis studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. Tomorrow at the field office we'll go through everything together. But tonight, you rest. Doctor's orders and mine." After Davis left, Diane helped Kesha into a wheelchair, despite her protests that she could walk just fine. As they moved through the hospital corridors toward the exit, Kesha saw at a television in the waiting room volume turned up showing footage from that morning. Her own face filled the screen, blood dripping from her chin, holding up documents with shaking hands. The anchor's voice was grave and measured. "In a shocking turn of events at Jefferson County Courthouse today, defense attorney Kesha Washington was assaulted by head bailiff Derek Miller during a routine hearing. What happened next has sent shockwaves through the legal community and raised serious questions about corruption in our justice system." Every person in the waiting room was watching. Some were crying. Others looked angry. A young black woman in scrubs caught Kesha's eye and mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Kesha nodded throat tight and let her mother wheel her toward the exit. Outside, 2 FBI agents were waiting beside a black SUV. They introduced themselves as Agent Marcus Chen and Agent Rachel Torres. Chen was tall and quiet. Torres was compact and alert, and both of them looked like they could handle themselves in a fight. "Ms. Washington," Torres said, "we'll be escorting you home and maintaining surveillance on your building tonight. Tomorrow we'll develop a more comprehensive security plan. The drive to Kesha's apartment took 20 minutes through evening traffic. Her phone buzzed constantly, texts, calls, emails flooding in faster than she could read them. Colleagues offering support, journalists requesting interviews, organizations wanting her to speak at events. And mixed in among the messages of solidarity were the other kind. You should be dead. You're going to pay for what you did. We know where you live. Diane saw her daughter's face pale as she scrolled through the threats. Baby, put that phone down. Mama, there's so many of them. Let the FBI handle it. That's what they're here for. But as they pulled up to Kesha's apartment building, a modest 3-story brick structure in a quiet neighborhood, Kesha noticed something that made her blood run cold. Stop the car, she said sharply. Chen hit the brakes. What's wrong? My apartment. 3rd floor, 2nd window from the left. The light's on. Did you leave it on this morning? No, I never do. I'm obsessive about turning off lights. Torres was already on the radio calling for backup. Chen drew his weapon. Stay in the car, both of you. Lock the doors. The 2 agents approached the building with the careful coordination of people who'd done this before. Diane grabbed Kesha's hand, squeezing hard. Please don't let anything else happen today, Diane whispered. Please, God. 10 minutes that felt like hours passed before Torres emerged holstering her weapon. She approached the SUV, and Kesha could see the tension in her shoulders. Someone was inside, Torres said grimly. They're gone now, but they left a message. What kind of message? Torres hesitated. Maybe you should wait until... What kind of message? They went through your files, the ones related to the Thompson case. Everything you had on your desk has been scattered, torn, destroyed. And on your bathroom mirror written in red lipstick. Torres paused. It says, "Drop dead bitch." Diane made a small wounded sound. Kesha felt rage replace fear in her chest, hot and fierce and clarifying. I want to see it. Ms. Washington. It's my apartment, my home. I want to see what they did. Against protocol and better judgment, Torres led her. The apartment looked like a tornado had hit it. Books scattered, cushions slashed, photographs torn from their frames. But it was the files that hurt most. 3 months of meticulous investigation, documentation, evidence collection, all ripped to shreds and scattered like confetti. In the bathroom, the message on the mirror was exactly as described. Crude, hateful, meant to terrify. It almost worked. But as Kesha stood there staring at those red letters, something shifted inside her. They'd punched her, threatened her, violated her home. And instead of breaking her, each attack had forged something harder. They don't understand, she said quietly. Understand what? Chen asked from the doorway. I made copies of everything, multiple copies. Some are in safety deposit boxes. Some are with my attorney. Some are with journalists I trust. Destroying these files doesn't destroy the evidence. It just makes me angrier. She turned to face the agents. And angry is dangerous. Torres allowed herself a small smile. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone more fragile. Someone we'd have to protect from reality. I am fragile, Kesha admitted. I'm terrified. I want to cry and hide and pretend this isn't happening. But I'm also my father's daughter, and he taught me that fear is just another word for knowing what matters. I'm afraid because this matters. Because justice matters. Because if I back down now, Jamal Henderson gets 20 years for a crime he didn't commit. And the next lawyer who tries to fight corruption might not have cameras in the courtroom. Diane appeared in the doorway, her face stricken at the sight of the destruction. Baby, you can't stay here tonight. I know. I'll stay with you. Not with me, with your brother in Atlanta. Tonight. Agent Chen can drive you to the airport right now. Mama? Don't mama me. These people broke into your home. Who knows what they'll do next? You need to be somewhere safe, somewhere far away from here. If I run now? You're not running, you're regrouping. There's a difference. Diane gripped her daughter's shoulders, careful of her injuries. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is live to fight another day. Your daddy knew that. He didn't charge into every battle guns blazing. He was strategic. Be strategic, baby. Kesha looked at her mother, then at the destroyed apartment, then at Torres and Chen. How long? She asked. How long do I need to be gone? 48 hours, Torres said. Give us time to secure your apartment, set up proper surveillance coordinate with local PD. By Thursday, we'll have a protection plan in place that doesn't require you to hide. And the Thompson investigation continues whether you're here or in Atlanta. We have enough evidence to keep Thompson and Miller detained without bail. We're executing more warrants tomorrow. The machine is in motion, Kesha. You started it, but it doesn't stop if you take 2 days to breathe. It was Agent Davis who called as they were packing a bag at Diane's house. Her voice was urgent. Kesha, Derek Miller just requested a meeting with his attorney and prosecutors. We think he's ready to flip. Kesha's heart raced. When? Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. He's scared. Thompson's people are already making threats against Miller's family. He's got a wife and 2 kids, and someone spray-painted "rat" on his garage door this afternoon. They're turning on each other. Like sharks in a feeding frenzy. Miller knows if he doesn't cooperate, he's looking at 20 years minimum. But if he gives us everyone names, dates, amounts, the whole structure, we can offer him a deal. What kind of deal? Reduced sentence. Witness protection for his family. It depends on what he gives us. Kesha was quiet for a moment. I should hate him. He punched me. He tried to intimidate me into silence, but right now all I can think about is his kids. They didn't choose this. That's what makes you a good lawyer, Davis said softly. And probably what's going to make testifying so hard, because you'll have to look at these people and see them as human, even as you help put them away. After the call ended, Kesha sat on her childhood bed in her mother's house, surrounded by the remnants of who she'd been before today. Softball trophies from high school, her college degree, a photograph of her father in his police uniform taken 2 weeks before he died in the line of duty. She picked up the photograph, tracing his face with her finger. I hope I'm making you proud, Daddy, she whispered. I hope you'd understand why I can't stop even when it's scary. Her father smiled up at her from the frozen moment in time, his eyes crinkling at the corners the way they always did when he laughed. He'd be proud, Diane said from the doorway. He'd also be worried sick just like me, but mostly proud. Did you ever ask him to stop when he was on the force dealing with dangerous people? Did you ever ask him to walk away? Diane sat beside her daughter on the bed. Every single day, in my head at least, out loud only once. What did he say? He said, if good people walk away from hard things, who's left to do them? And I knew he was right, even though I hated it. She wrapped an arm around Kesha's shoulders. Your father fought corruption too, you know. Internal Affairs was investigating his captain for taking bribes from drug dealers. Your daddy was the key witness. Kesha turned to stare at her mother. I didn't know that. It wasn't public. The night before he was supposed to testify, he died in that car accident. The official report said brake failure. I've never been completely sure it was an accident. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Mama, why didn't you ever tell me? Because you were 12 years old and you'd just lost your father. You didn't need conspiracy theories on top of grief. And maybe... Diane's voice cracked slightly. Maybe I didn't want you following in his footsteps. I wanted you to be a lawyer, yes, but I hoped you'd do real estate law or something safe. I should have known better. You're too much like him. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry for being brave, baby. Just promise me you'll also be smart. Brave and dead doesn't help anyone. That night, as Kesha tried to sleep in her childhood bed, her phone buzzed one more time. A text from an unknown number. I worked in Thompson's courthouse for 6 years. I saw things. I stayed quiet because I was afraid. But after watching you stand up today, I can't stay quiet anymore. I have information. I want to help. Please tell me how. Kesha stared at the message in the darkness. Then she forwarded it to Agent Davis with a simple note. It's starting. People are finding their courage. Within 20 minutes, Davis replied, We've received 43 similar messages tonight. Courthouse employees, former defendants, attorneys who were too afraid to speak up. You opened a floodgate, Kesha. Whatever happens next, remember you didn't do this alone. You showed people it was possible to fight back. Now they're joining the fight. Kesha closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her swollen jaw, the ache of her stitches, the deeper pain of exhaustion and fear and hope, all tangled together. Somewhere in a federal detention center, Judge Marcus Thompson was staring at concrete walls instead of his mahogany bench. Derek Miller was contemplating betraying everyone he'd ever worked with to save his family. And across Jefferson County in Atlanta, in courthouses and law offices and homes across the country, people were watching this story unfold and wondering if maybe, just maybe, one person really could make a difference. The answer, Kesha thought as sleep finally claimed her, was both simpler and more complicated than that. One person couldn't change everything. But one person could start something that became unstoppable. And she had. The morning came too soon, and with it the reality that couldn't be ignored. Kesha's face had ripened overnight into a spectacular palette of purple and black, the swelling making it difficult to open her left eye fully. Diane had tried to convince her to stay in bed, but by 7 a.m., they were in the car heading to the FBI field office, Agent Chen behind the wheel, and Torres riding shotgun. The building was unassuming from the outside, a gray concrete structure that could have been any government office. Inside was different. Agents moved with purpose through corridors lined with case files and evidence boxes. Kesha felt the weight of their glances as she passed some curious others, respectful, a few openly admiring. Agent Davis met them in the lobby looking like she hadn't slept. Derek Miller's attorney arrived 20 minutes ago. They've been in conference. Miller's ready to talk, but he wants to see you first. Me? Kesha's hand instinctively went to her bruised face. Why would he want to see me? Guilt, maybe. Or he wants to see the damage up close before he decides how much to give us. Either way, you don't have to do this. But Kesha was already moving toward the elevator. Yes, I do. The interrogation room was small and sterile, painted in that particular shade of beige that seemed designed to make people uncomfortable. Derek Miller sat at a metal table, his hands clasped in front of him, no longer in his bailiff's uniform, but in an Orange County Jail jumpsuit. The transformation was jarring. Without the uniform, the badge, the authority, he looked like what he was, a scared man who'd made terrible choices. His eyes widened when Kesha entered, taking in the full extent of what he'd done to her face. Jesus, he whispered. I didn't mean to. I didn't think. You didn't think you'd hit me that hard. Kesha sat down across from him, Agent Davis standing against the wall. Or you didn't think there'd be consequences. Miller's face crumpled. Both. Neither. Ms. Washington, Before you say anything. His attorney interrupted a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Reeves. We need to discuss terms. My client is willing to provide comprehensive testimony about the corruption network operating in Jefferson County and beyond. But we need immunity from prosecution for the assault charge and a significantly reduced sentence on the corruption charges. Davis crossed her arms. Your client assaulted an officer of the court on camera, in front of 47 witnesses. We don't need his testimony to convict him of that. But you need his testimony to convict everyone else, Reeves countered. Derek Miller has been head bailiff for 12 years. He's witnessed conversations, transactions, arrangements that never made it into Judge Thompson's careful records. He knows where the bodies are buried literally and figuratively. Kesha felt a chill at those last words. Literally? Miller looked at his hands. There was a defendant, 3 years ago. Guy named Marcus Webb. He was going to expose the whole operation. He died in county jail. The official report said he hung himself. But he didn't, Kesha said quietly. He didn't. Miller's voice was barely audible. 2 guards were paid to make it look like suicide. I don't know who gave the order, but I know it came from above Thompson. Someone told Thompson what needed to happen, and Thompson made it happen. The room fell silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Do you know the guards' names? Davis asked, her voice carefully controlled. Victor Ramsey and James Chen. They both still work at the county jail. Davis was already pulling out her phone, stepping into the hallway to make calls. Kesha sat frozen, looking at the man who'd punched her, trying to reconcile the violence of that moment with the broken figure before her now. Why did you do it? She asked. Why hit me? You could have just escorted me out. Miller finally met her eyes. Because Thompson told me to. He said you were dangerous, that you were going to destroy everything we'd built. He said if I didn't stop you, they'd hurt my family, my wife, my kids. His voice cracked. I've been taking bribes for 12 years, Ms. Washington. I've looked the other way while innocent people went to prison. I've done terrible things. But I never wanted to hurt anyone directly. And then, there you were holding up those documents, and I saw Thompson's face, and I knew if I didn't do something, they'd come after everyone I loved. So, you made me the sacrifice instead. Yes. No excuse, no justification. Just the truth. And I will regret it for the rest of my life. Kesha touched her swollen jaw, feeling the throb of bone and tissue trying to heal. How many people are involved in the network, I mean? How big is this? Miller looked at his attorney, who nodded permission. In Jefferson County alone, 4 judges, 3 prosecutors, a dozen defense attorneys, the county sheriff, and at least 20 other officials. But it goes bigger than that. There are connections to 3 other counties, and those counties connect to others. It's like a spider web, Ms. Washington. Touch one thread, and the whole thing vibrates. And I just set the spider loose, Kesha murmured. No, Miller said with surprising intensity. You gave the rest of us trapped in the web a chance to cut ourselves free. After I hit you, after I saw the cameras and the reporters and your blood on my hand, I went home and I held my daughter, and I realized I'd become the kind of man I joined law enforcement to fight. You didn't make me a monster. You just held up a mirror. Agent Davis returned, her face grim. We have agents en route to arrest Ramsey and Chen. Kesha, we need to talk, now. In Davis's office, the full scope of what Miller had revealed began to take shape. The operation wasn't just about fixing cases for money. It was a systematic corruption of the entire justice system, with tentacles reaching into law enforcement, legal defense, and even victim services. We're looking at RICO charges, Davis explained, referring to the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. This is organized crime dressed up in judicial robes. Miller's testimony gives us the roadmap, but we need evidence. Bank records, communications, witnesses. That's where you come in. Me? You've already done the groundwork. The documents you collected, the witnesses you interviewed, the timeline you constructed. We need you to walk us through everything. Help us understand the connections you've already identified. And then... Davis paused. Then we need you to be the face of this investigation. I don't understand. The public needs to see that this isn't some government witch hunt or political theater. They need to see a real attorney who fought real corruption and paid a real price for it. They need to see you. Kesha shook her head. I'm not a symbol. I'm just a lawyer who did her job. You're both. And I know you didn't ask for this, but the reality is that your story is what makes this case resonate beyond legal circles. People are watching. The assault video has been viewed 20 million times. Your name is trending nationally. Protesters are gathering outside the courthouse right now, demanding justice. You started something, Kesha, and now you have a choice: step back and let others tell your story, or step forward and shape the narrative yourself. Before Kesha could respond, Davis's phone rang. She answered, listened, and her expression shifted from serious to shocked. You're certain when? A pause. How many? Another pause. We're on our way. She hung up and looked at Kesha. Senator Michael Donahue just surrendered himself to federal authorities in Chicago. He's claiming he has information about corruption in multiple state court systems. He says he's been paying judges across 3 states for favorable rulings in cases involving his business interests. A senator. Kesha felt dizzy. This reaches the Senate. Apparently. And he's saying he'll testify about everything if we grant him immunity. He's scared, Kesha. They're all scared, because if you weren't afraid to fight back, maybe others won't be either. The news broke at noon, and the country exploded. Senator Donahue's surrender was captured by news helicopters as he walked into the FBI's Chicago field office flanked by attorneys. Within an hour, 3 more public officials in different states had requested meetings with federal prosecutors. The dominoes were falling so fast that law enforcement could barely keep up. Kesha watched it unfold from a conference room in the Atlanta FBI field office, where she'd finally been convinced to go after Miller's debriefing. Her brother Marcus had picked her up from the airport, taken one look at her face, and pulled her into a hug so tight she could barely breathe. "You're insane," he'd said into her hair. "Completely insane. And Dad would be so proud." Now they sat together in front of a television, watching the news coverage with a mix of awe and horror. The story had metastasized beyond Jefferson County, beyond one corrupt judge. It had become a national reckoning with the very concept of judicial integrity. In what legal experts are calling the largest corruption investigation in modern American history. The news anchor intoned. Federal authorities have now opened cases in 7 states. The investigation, sparked by defense attorney Kesha Washington's confrontation with Jefferson County Judge Marcus Thompson, has revealed a network of corruption that may have affected thousands of cases over more than a decade. The screen showed footage of Kesha holding up documents, blood on her face, defiance in her eyes. Then it cut to Agent Davis at a press conference. "I want to be clear about something," Davis was saying. This investigation began because one attorney refused to accept corruption as the cost of doing business. Kesha Washington risked her career, her safety, and ultimately her physical well-being to expose what she believed was wrong. She represents the best of what the legal profession should be. And because of her courage, we now have the opportunity to root out corruption that has infected our justice system at multiple levels. Kesha's phone rang. It was Davis calling from the podium. "Turn on Channel 7, Davis said. "Right now." Kesha switched channels and froze. The screen showed the interior of what looked like a federal courthouse, and standing at a podium, with Department of Justice emblazoned behind her, was the Attorney General of the United States. "This morning, President Morrison directed me to make the investigation of judicial corruption our highest priority. We are establishing a special task force, Operation Clean Bench, which will be led by FBI Special Agent Patricia Davis. This task force will have unlimited resources and the full support of the federal government. We will follow the evidence wherever it leads, no matter how high the corruption reaches." The Attorney General paused, looking directly into the camera. "To those who have information about corruption in our courts, I say this: come forward. You will be protected. You will be heard, and together we will restore integrity to our justice system." Kesha Washington showed us that one person can make a difference. Now it's time for all of us to be that person. Marcus whistled low. "Sis, you just became a national hero." "I'm not a hero. I'm just—" "Stop." Marcus cut her off gently. "Stop minimizing what you did. You stood up when everyone else was sitting down. You spoke up when everyone else was silent. That's the literal definition of heroism." Kesha's phone started buzzing with calls and texts. News outlets requesting interviews, law schools wanting her to speak, civil rights organizations offering support. The attention was overwhelming, dizzying, and more than a little terrifying. But it was a text from an unknown number that made her breath catch. "My name is Margaret Chen. I was the clerk who gave you access to the phone records. I've been in hiding since the arrests began because I was scared. But watching you on the news today, seeing what you've started, I'm not scared anymore. I have more recordings. Dozens of them. Conversations Thompson never knew were being captured. I want to give them to you. All of them." Kesha immediately forwarded the message to Davis, then called her directly. "Margaret Chen just reached out," she said when Davis answered. "She has more recordings." "I know. She contacted us 30 minutes ago. Kesha, what she has. It's devastating. Conversations between Thompson and appellate judges discussing how to protect each other. Discussions about specific cases, specific bribes. One recording where they're literally laughing about an innocent man they sent to prison because his attorney wouldn't pay them off." Kesha felt her stomach turn. Laughing. Like it was a joke. Like ruining someone's life was entertainment. Davis's voice was tight with anger. "These recordings are going to be the centerpiece of the prosecution. But there's a problem." "What problem?" "Some of them were recorded without the knowledge of all parties. Depending on the state, that might make them inadmissible in court. We need to verify the legality of each recording, and even then, some might get thrown out on technical grounds. But there's one recording that was made legally, and it's the one I need you to hear." "Why?" "Because it's about you, and you need to know what we're dealing with before you decide how involved you want to be going forward." 30 minutes later, Kesha sat in a secure conference room with noise-canceling headphones on, listening to a conversation recorded on September 18th, 3 weeks before the assault. Judge Thompson's voice was clear and cold. "The Washington woman is becoming a real problem. She's asking too many questions about the Henderson case." An unfamiliar male voice responded, "Can't you just deny her motions?" "I've been denying them, but she's persistent, and she's popular. The media loves her. If I come down too hard, it looks suspicious." A third voice, smoother and older. "So make her go away." "How?" "Discredit her. Find something in her past. A DUI, a bad relationship, anything we can use." "Already tried. She's clean. The woman doesn't even jaywalk." The smooth voice again. "Then create something. Plant evidence of misconduct. Bar complaints. Make her look unstable." Thompson's hesitation was audible. "That's risky. If it comes back to us, it won't. We have people who can handle this, or..." A long pause. "Or we handle it more directly." "What does that mean?" "It means accidents happen. Attorneys get mugged. Cars crash. People disappear." Kesha felt ice water flood her veins. Thompson again. "I'm not signing off on anything like that. Not without approval from..." The recording cut off. Kesha removed the headphones with shaking hands. Davis was watching her carefully. "Approval from who?" Kesha whispered. "Who's above Thompson?" "We don't know yet. The recording cuts off before the name is mentioned. But we're working on it. The voice analysis suggests the smooth voice belongs to someone with legal training, probably a senior attorney or judge." "They were discussing killing me like it was a business decision." "Yes. And the only reason they didn't is because Thompson was worried about approval from someone higher up in the organization. That's our assessment." Kesha stood abruptly, pacing the small room. "How deep does this go?" "Davis? How far up?" "We're still mapping it. But based on the evidence we've gathered in the last 48 hours, we believe the network includes at least 43 judges, 17 prosecutors, and numerous law enforcement officials across 7 states. The financial trail suggests annual revenues from corruption in the tens of millions of dollars." "Revenues? You're talking about it like a business." "Because that's what it is. A criminal enterprise that happens to operate inside the justice system." Davis leaned forward. "Kesha, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Are you willing to testify in grand jury proceedings, in trials and public hearings? Because if we're going to take down an organization this large, we need witnesses who can stand up under cross-examination. We need people who won't crack under pressure." Kesha thought about the recording about Thompson and his associates discussing her murder like it was a scheduling problem. She thought about Jamal Henderson, about Marcus Webb hanging dead in a jail cell, about all the innocent people sitting in prisons because they couldn't afford to pay a judge. "I'll testify," she said. "Wherever you need me, whenever you need me. I'll tell the truth until there's no breath left in my body." Davis smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "That's what I was afraid you'd say." Afraid? Because testifying makes you an even bigger target than you already are. These people have billions of dollars and connections that reach into every level of government. They will come after you with everything they have. Let them come. Kesha, I'm serious. Let them come. Because every time they try to intimidate me, every time they threaten me, every time they make a move against me, they prove exactly what we're saying about them. They prove that they're willing to destroy anyone who threatens their power. And that makes our case stronger. Davis studied her for a long moment. "You've thought this through." "I've thought about nothing else since yesterday morning. These people broke into my home. They discussed murdering me. They laughed about sending innocent people to prison. And I realize now that I have something they don't." "What's that?" "Nothing left to lose. They can threaten me, hurt me, maybe even kill me. But they can't make me shut up. They can't make me stop fighting. Because the truth is already out there. The recordings exist. The documents exist. The witnesses are coming forward. Even if something happens to me tomorrow, this investigation doesn't stop. The genie is out of the bottle." Davis's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her eyebrows rose. Derek Miller's attorney just sent over the preliminary witness list. Miller is willing to testify against 63 individuals, including 2 appellate court judges and a federal district court judge. A federal judge. Judge Harrison Matthews' Northern District. Miller says Matthews has been providing cover for state-level corruption in exchange for payments. If true, this becomes a federal conspiracy case with implications for hundreds, maybe thousands of wrongful convictions. The weight of it settled over the room like snow. This wasn't just about one corrupt judge anymore. It wasn't even about one corrupt county. It was about a systematic rot that had infected the justice system at multiple levels, and exposing it would require dismantling institutions that millions of Americans depended on. "People are going to lose faith," Kesha said quietly. "In courts, in justice, in the whole system." "They already have," Davis replied. "What we're doing now is giving them a reason to believe again. We're showing them that the system can still correct itself, that corruption can be exposed and punished. That's why your role in this is so important. You're proof that the system can work when people have the courage to make it work." A knock on the door interrupted them. Agent Chen stuck his head in. "Ma'am, we have a situation. News crews are gathering outside. Somehow they found out Ms. Washington is here." Davis cursed under her breath. "How did they find out?" "Unknown. But there are at least 20 satellite trucks out there and the number is growing." Kesha looked at Davis. "What do I do?" "You could slip out the back, avoid them entirely. Or you could talk to them. Control your own narrative. Tell your story in your own words before someone else tells it for you." Kesha thought about Margaret Chen hiding in fear until she found courage. About Derek Miller trapped in corruption until someone showed him a way out. About all the people watching this unfold on their televisions, wondering if justice was just a word or something real. "I'll talk to them," she said. "But I need to call my mama first. She's going to see this on TV, and I'd rather she hear my voice before she has a heart attack." 20 minutes later, Kesha Washington stepped out of the Atlanta FBI field office into a wall of cameras and shouted questions. Her face was still bruised, her lips still stitched, but she walked to the microphones with her head high. "My name is Kesha Washington." She began, her voice steady, despite the trembling in her hands. 3 days ago, I was assaulted in a courtroom while trying to defend an innocent man. Today, I'm standing here to tell you that what happened to me isn't the story. The story is the thousands of people who've been denied justice by a corrupt system. The story is the witnesses coming forward. The story is the agents and prosecutors working around the clock to hold powerful people accountable. The questions came fast and loud. Are you afraid for your safety? Do you regret exposing Judge Thompson? What do you want to see happen next? Kesha held up her hand, asking for quiet. I want to see justice, real justice, not the kind that can be bought or sold or fixed by people with power and money. I want to see a system where attorneys can defend their clients without fear of being assaulted, where defendants get fair trials, not predetermined outcomes, where judges uphold the law instead of corrupting it. She paused, looking directly into the cameras. And I want every person watching this to know if you have information about corruption, if you've witnessed injustice, if you know the truth about what's happening in our courts, please come forward. You're not alone anymore. We're building something here. Something that can't be stopped by threats or violence or intimidation. We're building accountability. A reporter shouted, What do you say to people who think this investigation is overreaching? That you're destroying careers based on allegations? Kesha touched her bruised face. I'd say these aren't allegations. They're facts backed by evidence, testimony, and recordings. And the only careers being destroyed are those built on corruption. If your career can't survive in an honest system, maybe it shouldn't survive at all. As she turned to walk back inside, a young woman in the crowd called out, Ms. Washington, I'm a law student. You're my hero. What advice would you give to lawyers starting out? Kesha stopped, turned back. The question cut through all the chaos and noise, touching something deep. Don't let the system break you, she said softly. Don't let cynicism convince you that corruption is just how things work. Stand up for what's right even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Because the law isn't just words on paper. It's a promise we make to each other that justice is possible, that truth matters, that everyone deserves a fair chance. Keep that promise, no matter what it costs you. The young woman was crying. So were several others in the crowd. Kesha went back inside, and Agent Chen escorted her to a private office where she finally allowed herself to break down. The tears came hot and fast, carrying with them 3 days of fear and pain and anger and hope all mixed together. Marcus found her there 20 minutes later and held her while she cried. It's too much, she sobbed. It's too big. I can't. You can, he said firmly. You already are. Kesha, you just spoke to the nation. You gave people hope. You showed them courage looks like. That's not nothing. That's everything. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Agent Davis. Margaret Chen just delivered 47 additional recordings to our field office. Some date back 12 years. We're going to need you back in Jefferson County by Monday to help us decode them. And Kesha, thank you. For all of it. Kesha wiped her eyes, took a shaky breath, and looked at her brother. It's not over, is it? No, Marcus said gently. It's just beginning. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. Kesha stood in front of the mirror in her hotel room, studying the fading bruises on her face. The purple had shifted to yellow-green, the swelling had gone down, but the stitches in her lip were still visible. She traced them with her finger, a reminder written in her own flesh of what happened when you challenged power. Agent Torres knocked on the door. Ready, Ms. Washington? No. Kesha said honestly, but let's go anyway. The drive back to Jefferson County took 2 hours, and with every mile, Kesha felt the knot in her stomach tighten. She was returning to the place where she'd been assaulted, where her home had been violated, where people had discussed killing her like it was a business expense. But she was also returning to finish what she'd started. The FBI field office in Jefferson County had been transformed into a war room. Whiteboards covered every wall, connecting photographs of suspects with lines of red string. Bank statements, recordings, witness testimonies, all organized into a massive web that showed the true scope of the corruption. Agent Davis greeted them at the door, looking exhausted but energized. Margaret Chen is waiting for you in conference room B. She specifically asked to meet with you before we start the formal debriefing. Margaret Chen was 72 years old, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and hands that trembled slightly as she held her coffee cup. When Kesha entered, Margaret stood immediately, her eyes filling with tears. "Ms. Washington, I've wanted to meet you properly for so long." "Ms. Chen, thank you for coming forward. Thank you for everything." Margaret reached out and gently touched Kesha's face near the fading bruise. "They hurt you. Because of what I gave you, they hurt you." "No," Kesha said firmly, taking Margaret's hands. "They hurt me because they were desperate to hide the truth. You gave me the tools to expose that truth. There's a difference." Margaret sat back down, and Kesha joined her at the table. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Margaret pulled out a small external hard drive. "This contains every recording I made over 12 years. 473 conversations. I never listened to most of them. I was too afraid. But after I saw you on television standing in front of those cameras with your face bruised and your voice strong, I went home and I listened to every single one." "That must have been difficult." "It was devastating." Margaret's voice broke. "I heard them laugh about ruining lives. I heard them discuss innocent people like they were commodities to be traded. I heard Judge Thompson tell someone to handle a witness who was going to testify against one of his friends. 3 days later, that witness was found dead in his apartment. The police called it a drug overdose." Kesha felt her chest tighten. "Do you remember the witness's name?" "Anthony Delgado. He was supposed to testify in a corruption case against a city councilman. The case fell apart without him." Agent Davis, who'd been listening from the doorway, immediately pulled out her phone. "I'm reopening that investigation right now." Over the next 6 hours, Kesha and a team of federal agents went through Margaret's recordings methodically. Each conversation was worse than the last. Judges discussing how to split bribe money. Prosecutors agreeing to throw cases in exchange for campaign contributions. Defense attorneys coordinating with judges to ensure their clients received favorable treatment, while their competitors' clients were railroaded. But it was recording number 287 that changed everything. The date stamp showed September 2nd, just 5 weeks earlier. Judge Thompson's voice was clear. "We have a problem. The Washington attorney is getting too close to the Henderson case, and if she gets that evidence admitted, it's going to open questions about 18 other cases." The smooth voice Kesha had heard before responded, 18 cases that we need to stay closed. How much does she know? Too much. She has bank statements, witness testimonies. I don't know how she got access to sealed records, but she did. Then we need to consider our options carefully. This isn't just about Jefferson County anymore. If those 18 cases get scrutinized, it creates a paper trail that leads to 3 other jurisdictions. And from there it goes all the way to you, Justice Brennan. Kesha's blood turned to ice. Justice Brennan. State Supreme Court Justice Robert Brennan. Agent Davis stopped the recording. The room was completely silent. "A Supreme Court Justice," Kesha whispered. "The corruption goes all the way to the state Supreme Court." "Apparently," Davis said grimly. "And if Justice Brennan is involved, we need to assume others on the court might be compromised as well." Within an hour, the Attorney General was on a secure video call with the team. Her face filled the conference room screen, and her expression was grave. "This changes everything," she said. "If we have a sitting Supreme Court justice involved in systematic corruption, the implications are staggering. Every case that court has decided in the last decade becomes suspect. Every ruling, every decision, every precedent. We need to move carefully," Davis cautioned. "Brennan has connections everywhere. If he gets wind that we're investigating him, evidence will disappear, witnesses will recant, and we'll never get another chance." "Agreed. For now, this stays in this room. No one outside this investigative team knows we're looking at Brennan. We build an airtight case before we make a move." The Attorney General looked directly at Kesha. "Ms. Washington, how are you holding up?" "I'm angry," Kesha said honestly. "I'm scared, and I'm determined to see this through." "Good, because we're going to need you to be all 3 of those things in the coming weeks." The investigation accelerated with brutal efficiency. Using Margaret's recordings and the financial trails they'd already established, federal agents executed coordinated raids across 7 states. On Wednesday morning, simultaneous arrests were made of 19 judges, 8 prosecutors, and 23 other officials. Kesha watched the news coverage from the FBI office, seeing judge after judge led out of courthouses in handcuffs. The images were shocking in their uniformity. Powerful people who'd believed themselves untouchable now facing the same system they'd corrupted. But it was the footage from Jefferson County Courthouse that made Kesha's throat tight. Dozens of people stood on the courthouse steps, holding signs, "Justice for Kesha. Clean courts now. Truth matters." One woman held a photograph of a young man with the caption, "My son, wrongfully convicted, 8 years stolen." Agent Torres found Kesha wiping tears from her eyes as she watched. "They're calling you the catalyst," Torres said gently. "The person who made all of this possible." "I'm not a catalyst. I'm just a lawyer who wouldn't shut up." Sometimes that's the same thing. The phone on the conference table rang. Davis answered, listened, and her expression shifted from serious to shocked. "Are you absolutely certain?" A pause. "How many?" Another pause. "My God, yes, yes, bring them all in." She hung up and looked at Kesha. Derek Miller just provided a list of every case he knows was fixed in the last 12 years. The team is cross-referencing it with court records right now, but preliminary numbers suggest over 200 cases in Jefferson County alone. 200 innocent people. Kesha felt dizzy. Some innocent, some guilty, but given improper sentences. Some who should have been convicted, but walked free because they paid the right people. The entire system has been compromised. We need to review every single case. We are. The Department of Justice is creating a special division just to handle the review process. We're pulling attorneys from across the country. But Kesha... Davis hesitated. This is going to take years, and not everyone is going to be happy about it. There are people who received favorable treatment because of corruption, and they're going to fight to keep those advantages. Let them fight. Justice isn't supposed to have a price tag. That afternoon, Kesha received a visitor she hadn't expected. Jamal Henderson, the young man whose case had started everything. He'd been released from custody immediately after Thompson's arrest, but Kesha hadn't seen him since that chaotic morning in the courtroom. He looked different. Cleaner, healthier, like someone who'd been holding their breath for months and could finally exhale. When he saw Kesha, he crossed the room in 3 strides and hugged her so tightly she gasped. "Ms. Washington, they told me what happened. I saw your face on the news. I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be free. That's all I wanted for you." Jamal pulled back, and she saw tears streaming down his face. "I got into Georgia Tech. My acceptance letter came yesterday. They held my spot, even though I couldn't attend because I was in jail for a crime I didn't commit. I'm going back to finish my engineering degree." "That's wonderful, Jamal." "It's because of you. If you hadn't fought for me, if you hadn't stood up to that judge, I'd be in prison right now facing 20 years. My life would be over. And now," he laughed through his tears, "now I have a future again." Kesha felt her own tears threaten to spill. "You always deserved a future. The system failed you. I just helped correct the failure." "No," Jamal said firmly. "You risked everything for me. You got hurt for me. You could have walked away after Thompson denied your first motion, but you didn't. You kept fighting. Why? Because it was right. Because you were innocent. Because if I don't fight for people like you, what's the point of being a lawyer?" Jamal reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote this for you. I don't know if it's any good, but I wanted you to have it." The paper was a letter handwritten in careful script. "Dear Ms. Washington, there are no words adequate to thank you for saving my life. That's what you did. You saved my life, not just by getting me out of jail, but by showing me that there are still people who believe in justice, who fight for truth, who won't back down even when it's dangerous. You showed me that one person can make a difference. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be that kind of person. Thank you for giving me the chance. Jamal Henderson. Kesha folded the letter carefully and held it against her chest. Thank you for this. I'm going to keep it forever. After Jamal left, promising to stay in touch and to let her know how his first semester went, Kesha sat alone in the conference room holding his letter. This was why she did it. Not for the headlines, or the recognition, or the national attention. For moments like this. For young men who got their futures back. For justice real and tangible, and worth fighting for. Agent Chen knocked on the door frame. Ms. Washington, we have a situation. Kesha's heart sank. What kind of situation? The good kind, I think. There are 87 people gathered in the building's lobby. They're former defendants from Jefferson County cases. They heard you were here, and they want to meet you. They want to say thank you. Kesha followed Chen down to the lobby, and what she saw took her breath away. Dozens of people, all ages, all races, standing quietly with signs and photographs. A woman in her 60s held a picture of herself from 20 years ago, labeled wrongfully convicted, served 8 years. A young man carried a sign that said, "My father died in jail for a crime he didn't commit." An elderly man simply held a placard reading, "Thank you for having courage." They started clapping when they saw her. The sound filled the lobby, echoing off the marble floors, growing louder and louder, until it felt like thunder. Kesha didn't know what to say. She'd never been good with crowds, never comfortable being the center of attention. But these people weren't seeing Kesha Washington, defense attorney. They were seeing hope. They were seeing proof that the system could still work, that corruption could be exposed, that someone had cared enough to fight. My name is Sarah Mitchell. The woman with the old photograph said, stepping forward. 20 years ago, I was convicted of embezzlement based on testimony that Judge Thompson later admitted in one of those recordings was false. I lost 20 years of my life. But because of you, my case is being reviewed. I might finally get my conviction overturned. I'm Marcus Webb's brother, a young man said, his voice shaking. You mentioned my brother in one of your statements. He was murdered in county jail because he was going to expose the corruption. The official report said suicide, but we always knew. We always knew, but nobody would listen. Until you. One by one, they shared their stories. Loved ones lost years, stolen lives, destroyed by a system that was supposed to protect them. And Kesha stood there listening to every word, bearing witness to every injustice, feeling the weight of their pain and their hope settle onto her shoulders. When the last person had spoken, an elderly woman approached. She moved slowly using a cane, and her eyes were fierce with intelligence and determination. I don't have a story about being wrongfully convicted, she said. I'm Judge Helen Reeves, retired. I served on the bench for 32 years, and I tried to do it with integrity. But I knew there was corruption. I saw things, heard whispers, noticed patterns. And I stayed silent because I told myself I wasn't certain that it wasn't my place, that speaking up would destroy my career. She looked directly at Kesha. You're 20 years younger than I am, and you have more courage than I ever had. You did what I should have done decades ago. And I want you to know you're not alone. There are dozens of judges, prosecutors, and attorneys who are disgusted by what's been exposed. We're organizing. We're creating a coalition for judicial reform. And we want you to lead it. I'm not qualified to lead. You're the most qualified person in this country, Judge Reeves interrupted gently. Because you paid the price. You have the moral authority that comes from actually fighting the battle, not just talking about it. Will you at least consider it? Before Kesha could answer, Agent Davis appeared, her face urgent. Kesha, we need you upstairs, now. They ran to the elevator, Chen and Torres flanking them. In the conference room, the large screen showed a live news feed. Breaking news banners scrolled across the bottom. State Supreme Court Justice Robert Brennan arrested on corruption charges. What happened? Kesha asked. You said we were keeping the Brennan investigation quiet. We were. But 30 minutes ago, Brennan's chief of staff walked into our D.C. field office with boxes of evidence. Financial records, recorded conversations, emails documenting bribes and case fixing going back 15 years. She gave us everything. Why would she do that? Davis smiled grimly. She said she saw you on television standing in front of those cameras with your face bruised and your voice steady, and she realized she'd been making excuses for corruption for too long. She said if you could stand up to Judge Thompson, she could stand up to Justice Brennan. The news footage showed Brennan being led from his home in handcuffs, his face pale and shocked. The reporter's voice was breathless. In what can only be described as an unprecedented development, State Supreme Court Justice Robert Brennan has been arrested on federal corruption charges. Sources close to the investigation say the charges include racketeering, bribery, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and potentially accessory to murder. This arrest brings to 43 the number of judges arrested in Operation Clean Bench, the nationwide corruption investigation sparked by defense attorney Kesha Washington's confrontation with Jefferson County Judge Marcus Thompson just 1 week ago. 1 week. It had only been 1 week since Derek Miller's fist had connected with her jaw. 1 week since the world had changed. Davis's phone rang continuously. She answered calls from the Attorney General, from senators demanding briefings, from state governors asking how many of their judges were compromised. The scope of what they'd uncovered was still expanding, still revealing new tentacles of corruption spreading through the justice system like cancer. "We need to make a statement," Davis said after the 5th call. "The public is scared. They're wondering if any court decision can be trusted. We need to show them we're in control, that we're handling this." "Are we in control?" Kesha asked quietly. "Honestly, I don't know. This is bigger than anything we've ever dealt with. But we have to act like we are. We have to give people something to believe in." That evening, as the sun set over Jefferson County, Kesha stood on the steps of the federal building with Agent Davis, the Attorney General, appearing via video link on screens set up for the press conference. Hundreds of reporters crowded the plaza, their cameras creating a forest of technology and attention. The Attorney General spoke first, her voice firm and authoritative. "Today marks a significant milestone in Operation Clean Bench. With the arrest of State Supreme Court Justice Robert Brennan, we have now taken into custody 43 judges, 17 prosecutors, and 72 other officials involved in what we now know is the largest judicial corruption network in United States history. This network has operated for at least 15 years, affecting an estimated 5,000 cases across 7 states. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. "We are establishing a special review commission to examine every case touched by these corrupt officials. Where we find evidence of wrongful conviction or improper sentencing, we will take immediate action to correct those injustices. This process will take time, perhaps years, but it will be thorough and it will be fair." The Attorney General paused, and her image on the screens shifted to show Kesha standing beside Davis. None of this would have been possible without the courage of one attorney who refused to accept corruption as the cost of doing business. Kesha Washington risked her career, her safety, and her life to expose what she knew was wrong. She represents the best of what the legal profession should be. And because of her courage, we now have the opportunity to restore integrity to a system that millions of Americans depend on for justice. Agent Davis took the microphone. "I want to be clear about something else. This investigation is ongoing. We have reason to believe the corruption extends beyond the individuals we've arrested so far. We are urging anyone with information about judicial corruption to come forward. You will be protected, you will be heard, and together we will root out this cancer from our justice system." Then Davis turned to Kesha. "Ms. Washington, would you like to say a few words?" Kesha stepped to the microphone, her heart pounding. She looked out at the sea of faces, the cameras, the lights, and beyond them, to the ordinary people who'd gathered to watch. People who'd been hurt by the system. People who still hoped it could be fixed. "A week ago, I was just trying to do my job," she began. I was trying to defend my client to present evidence to seek justice. And for that, I was assaulted. But that assault became the catalyst for something much bigger than me or my case. It exposed a network of corruption that had been hiding in plain sight for years. She touched her lip where the stitches pulled slightly as she spoke. I'm standing here today with a still healing face to tell you something important. The system is broken, but it's not destroyed. It's corrupted, but it's not beyond saving. And the only way we fix it is by refusing to accept corruption as normal, by demanding better, by fighting for justice even when that fight costs us something. A reporter shouted, "Are you afraid of retaliation?" "Yes," Kesha said honestly. "I'm terrified. These people have shown they're willing to hurt anyone who threatens them. But fear doesn't erase responsibility. Fear doesn't make injustice acceptable. So yes, I'm afraid. But I'm also still here, still fighting, still believing that truth matters more than power." Another reporter. "What do you want to see happen now?" "I want to see every wrongful conviction overturned, every innocent person freed, every corrupt official held accountable regardless of how powerful they are. I want to see a justice system that actually serves justice, not money, or power, or political connections. And I want other attorneys, other judges, other people working in the system to know that they can stand up too, that they don't have to stay silent. That change is possible." As the press conference ended and Kesha walked back inside surrounded by federal agents and the chaos of an investigation that had taken on a life of its own, she felt her phone buzz. A text from her mother. "Just watched you on TV. Your daddy is so proud. I'm so proud. And I'm still worried sick. Please be careful, baby." Kesha smiled through sudden tears and typed back, "I'll be careful, Mama. I promise. Love you." But even as she sent the message, she knew the truth. There was no careful way to fight this battle. There was only forward into whatever came next, armed with nothing but the truth and the belief that it had to be enough. Because it was all she had. 3 months later, Kesha sat in a federal courtroom that looked nothing like the one where this had all begun. This one was larger, more imposing, with high ceilings and wood paneling that spoke of gravitas and permanence. Judge Marcus Thompson sat at the defense table in a gray suit instead of judicial robes, looking smaller, somehow diminished by the loss of power that had defined him for nearly 3 decades. Kesha was on the witness stand, her hand still raised from taking the oath. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Janet Mills, approached with a tablet containing the evidence Kesha knew by heart. "Ms. Washington, can you tell the court what happened on the morning of October 1st in Courtroom 7B? Kesha took a breath and began. She'd told this story dozens of times now, to FBI agents and grand juries and preliminary hearings, but this was different. This was the trial. This was where everything she'd fought for would either stand or fall. She described presenting her evidence, Thompson's reaction, Derek Miller's approach, and then the moment of impact. She touched her face unconsciously, though the bruises had long faded, leaving only memory. "And what happened after Bailiff Miller struck you?" Mills asked. "I refused to leave. I had evidence that needed to be seen. Evidence of systematic corruption involving Judge Thompson, his bailiff, and others. I knew if I walked away at that moment, the evidence might disappear, witnesses might recant, and an innocent man would go to prison." Thompson's attorney, a distinguished man named Charles Worthington, rose for cross-examination. He was good at his job, Kesha knew. He'd have to be to take on this case. "Ms. Washington, isn't it true that you had a history of confrontational behavior with Judge Thompson prior to this incident?" "I had a history of challenging improper rulings, yes." "And isn't it true that you were facing disciplinary action from the state bar for those confrontations?" "A complaint was filed by Judge Thompson himself. Yes, the Bar Association dismissed it as baseless. But the complaint existed. You had a reputation for being difficult, confrontational, unwilling to follow courtroom decorum." Kesha met his eyes steadily. "I had a reputation for defending my clients vigorously. If that's difficult, then I'm guilty as charged." A few people in the gallery chuckled. The judge gavelled for quiet. Worthington changed tactics. "Ms. Washington, you've become something of a celebrity since this incident. Book deals, speaking engagements, media appearances. Haven't you profited considerably from this situation?" "I've turned down every book deal and paid appearance offer I've received," Kesha said quietly. "The only speaking I've done has been pro bono work for law schools and civil rights organizations. I haven't made a single dollar from what happened to me." "But you've gained fame, recognition, career advancement." "I've gained a target on my back." Kesha interrupted, her voice sharp. "I've gained death threats that arrive daily. I've gained the knowledge that there are people who want me dead because I expose corruption. If that's advancement, Mr. Worthington, you're welcome to it." The courtroom fell silent. Worthington tried a few more angles, but Kesha had been prepared by the best prosecutors in the country. When she finally stepped down from the witness stand, she felt drained but solid. She'd told the truth. That was all she could do. Derek Miller testified next, and his testimony was devastating. He detailed every bribe he'd witnessed, every case he'd seen fixed, every threat he'd heard Thompson make. His voice broke when he described being ordered to assault Kesha. "I knew it was wrong," Miller said, tears streaming down his face. "I knew it the moment he told me to do it, but I was afraid. I'd been part of this system for so long I didn't know how to get out. And then Ms. Washington stood there with her evidence, and I realized I had a choice. Be the person who silenced her, or be the person who let the truth come out. I made the wrong choice in that moment. But watching her refuse to back down after I hit her, seeing her stand up and keep fighting, that's when I knew I had to make the right choice, even if it was too late." The trial lasted 3 weeks. Margaret Chen testified about the recordings. Federal agents presented financial evidence showing millions of dollars flowing through Thompson's offshore accounts. Defense attorneys who'd been caught in the web testified about the pressure they'd faced to participate or be shut out of the system entirely. When the verdict came back, Kesha was in a different courtroom, working on behalf of a client whose conviction was being reviewed. Agent Torres found her during a recess. "Guilty on all counts," Torres said, her face split by a rare smile. "Thompson just got convicted of racketeering, bribery, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and assault. He's looking at 40 years minimum." Kesha sank into a chair, feeling something release in her chest that she hadn't realized she'd been holding. 40 years. He'll die in prison, and that's just the beginning. Brennan's trial starts next month. 17 other judges have already pleaded guilty. The dominoes are falling, Kesha. You did it. But Kesha didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired, bone deep, and soul weary. How many cases have been overturned so far? 473, with more being reviewed every day. We've freed 67 people from prison who were wrongfully convicted. 67 people who have their lives back because you wouldn't stay silent. That night, Kesha attended a gathering at a community center in Jefferson County. The sign outside read, "Exoneration Celebration," and inside were dozens of people whose convictions had been overturned because of the investigation. They'd invited Kesha, specifically wanting to thank her in person. She walked through the room shaking hands and receiving hugs from people whose faces she'd seen in case files. A young woman named Lisa Martinez grabbed her hand and held it tight. "I was 17 when Judge Thompson sent me to prison for a crime I didn't commit," Lisa said. "I served 9 years. 9 years of my life stolen. My daughter was 2 when I went in. She's 11 now and she barely knows me. But because of you, I'm home. I get to rebuild that relationship. I get to be her mother again." An elderly man named Robert Chen approached with his adult son. "My boy was convicted of manslaughter. He served 15 years. The real killer confessed last month after his conviction was overturned. My son lost 15 years, but at least he's alive. At least he's free. Thank you doesn't seem like enough." "It's more than enough," Kesha said, her voice thick with emotion. "You being here, being free, being with your families, that's everything." But it was the young man standing alone in the corner who broke her heart. He couldn't have been more than 25, with haunted eyes and hands that trembled when he held his plastic cup of punch. "I'm David Reeves," he said when Kesha approached. "You don't know me. My case wasn't in Jefferson County, but Judge Thompson had connections to the judge who convicted me. The corruption spread like you said it would. They're reviewing my case now because of what you exposed." "What were you convicted of?" "Murder." "But I didn't do it. I was 18 in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I couldn't afford a good lawyer. The public defender I got was overwhelmed and inexperienced. I've been in prison for 7 years for a crime I didn't commit. But yesterday the prosecutor's office called. They found evidence that was hidden from my trial. Evidence that proves I'm innocent. They're filing to vacate my conviction next week." David's voice broke. "I'm going to be free. After 7 years in hell, I'm going to be free. And it's because you wouldn't stop fighting." Kesha hugged him, feeling his shoulders shake with sobs, and she cried too. For David, for Lisa, for all the people whose lives had been destroyed by corruption and were only now beginning to heal. The investigation continued to expand in ways no one had anticipated. Federal authorities discovered that the corruption network had tentacles reaching into 12 states, not 7. The total number of compromised officials climbed to over 200, and the precious cases that represented real human lives numbered in the thousands. Congress took notice. Senator Patricia Morrison, chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, announced a series of hearings on judicial corruption and reform. Kesha was called to testify on a cold January morning 4 months after the assault that had changed everything. The Senate chamber was packed. Every seat filled, cameras everywhere, the weight of history pressing down like a physical force. Kesha sat at a long table with Agent Davis on one side and Judge Helen Reeves on the other. The 3 women who'd become the public faces of Operation Clean Bench. Senator Morrison, a formidable woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and sharper eyes, opened the hearing with words that made headlines around the world. "What we've witnessed in recent months is nothing short of a constitutional crisis. The systematic corruption of our judicial system represents a fundamental betrayal of the American people's trust. Today, we begin the work of ensuring this never happens again." When it was Kesha's turn to speak, she pulled out the letter Jamal Henderson had written her. She'd carried it every day since he'd given it to her. "Senator Morrison, members of the committee, I didn't come here to talk about what happened to me. I came to talk about what happens next. Because exposing corruption is only half the battle. The other half is preventing it from taking root again." She held up Jamal's letter. This was written by a young man who spent 6 months in jail for a crime he didn't commit. He's now back in college studying engineering, building a future he almost lost. He represents what's possible when the system works. But for every Jamal Henderson, there are thousands of others we haven't reached yet. Thousands of people sitting in cells because justice was for sale and they couldn't afford the price. Kesha's voice grew stronger. "We need comprehensive reform. We need transparency in judicial decision-making. We need independent oversight of judges and prosecutors. We need to close the loopholes that allowed corrupt officials to operate with impunity for years. And we need to make it safe for attorneys, for clerks, for anyone who works in the justice system to report corruption without fear of retaliation." Senator Morrison leaned forward. "What you're describing would require significant changes to how our courts operate. Some might say it would undermine judicial independence." With respect, Senator, what undermines judicial independence is corruption. What undermines it is knowing that powerful people can buy favorable rulings. Real independence means judges who are free to rule according to law and evidence, not according to who paid them the most. Reform doesn't threaten that independence. It protects it. Over the next 6 hours, Kesha Davis and Judge Reeves laid out a comprehensive plan for judicial reform. Mandatory financial disclosures for all judges. Independent ethics commissions with real enforcement power. Whistleblower protections for anyone reporting corruption. Regular audits of case outcomes to identify statistical anomalies that might indicate bias or fixing. The testimony sparked a national conversation that dominated news coverage for weeks. Editorials debated the balance between judicial independence and accountability. Law professors appeared on talk shows to discuss reform proposals. And slowly, painfully, consensus began to build. 6 months after Kesha's testimony, Congress passed the Judicial Integrity Act with bipartisan support. The bill included most of what she'd advocated for, along with provisions for victim compensation and expedited review of cases touched by corruption. President Morrison signed the bill in a ceremony at the White House, and Kesha stood behind her, as she did, along with Jamal Henderson, Lisa Martinez, David Reeves, and dozens of others, whose lives had been transformed by the investigation. This legislation represents a promise. President Morrison said, her voice carrying across the Rose Garden. A promise that justice will not be for sale in America. That no one, no matter how powerful, is above the law. And that those who have been wronged by corruption will have a path to restoration. We make this promise because one attorney had the courage to fight when fighting was dangerous, because federal agents had the dedication to follow evidence wherever it led, and because ordinary Americans refused to accept corruption as normal. After the signing, as photographers captured the moment and reporters shouted questions, the president pulled Kesha aside. "I have a proposition for you," President Morrison said. The Judicial Integrity Act creates a new position, Director of the Office of Judicial Integrity. It's a cabinet-level position with authority to investigate corruption, audit court systems, and enforce ethics standards across the federal judiciary. I want you to lead it. Kesha stared at her. "Madam President, I'm a defense attorney. I'm not qualified to—" "You're the most qualified person in the country. You've lived this fight. You understand what's at stake better than any bureaucrat or career politician. You have the moral authority that comes from sacrifice. And you have the trust of the American people." President Morrison smiled. "Think about it. But not for too long. We need someone in that position, and we need them to be fearless." That evening, Kesha called her mother from her hotel room in Washington. "The president offered me a job, Mama. I saw, everyone saw, it was on every news channel." Diane's voice was cautious. "Are you going to take it?" "I don't know. It means giving up my practice, leaving Jefferson County, moving to Washington. It means living in the spotlight permanently. And Mama, I'm tired. I'm so tired of fighting." "Then rest, baby. You've earned it. You've done more than anyone could have asked." "But what if there's more to do? What if I'm the only one who can do it?" Diane was quiet for a long moment. "Your daddy used to say that courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. You've been afraid this whole time, but you kept doing what was right. If you take this job, you'll be afraid then too. But you'll also be exactly where you need to be." 2 weeks later, Kesha Washington was confirmed as the first director of the Office of Judicial Integrity. The Senate vote was 94-6, a rare display of bipartisan agreement. Judge Helen Reeves became her deputy director, and together they began building an agency designed to ensure that what happened in Jefferson County could never happen again. The work was exhausting and endless. Kesha reviewed corruption complaints from across the country. She developed protocols for investigating judges while protecting judicial independence. She testified before Congress, negotiated with state Supreme Courts, and fought battles against entrenched interests who saw reform as a threat. But she also saw the impact. Corruption investigations led to more arrests, more overturned convictions, more lives restored. The transparency measures they implemented made it harder for corrupt officials to operate in shadows. The whistleblower protections gave courage to people who'd been silent for years. A year after her appointment, Kesha returned to Jefferson County for a ceremony. The courthouse steps where she'd sat bloodied and defiant now bore a bronze plaque. Judge Reeves unveiled it to applause from hundreds of gathered citizens. The plaque read, "In honor of those who risk everything to defend justice." On this spot, attorney Kesha Washington stood against corruption and sparked a movement that restored integrity to our courts. May all who enter here remember that justice requires courage, Truth demands sacrifice, and one voice speaking loudly enough can change the world. October 1st, 2024. Kesha traced the words with her fingers, remembering the fear and pain and determination of that day. So much had changed. Thompson was in federal prison. Brennan had been convicted and sentenced to 50 years. Derek Miller was serving a reduced sentence and speaking to law enforcement groups about the dangers of corruption. Margaret Chen had become a champion for transparency, working with Kesha's office to develop better recording and documentation systems. And the cases, the precious cases, continued to be resolved. Over 2,000 convictions had been reviewed. 847 had been overturned. Lives restored, families reunited. Justice served late, but served nonetheless. Jamal Henderson stood beside her at the ceremony, now a junior at Georgia Tech. "I'm going to be an engineer," he told the crowd when invited to speak. "But before I build bridges and design systems, I wanted to say thank you to the woman who built a bridge for me out of injustice and into a future I thought I'd lost. Ms. Washington didn't just save my life. She showed me what integrity looks like. She showed all of us." Lisa Martinez spoke too, holding her daughter's hand. "I lost 9 years with my child because of corruption. But I got to come home because one person refused to be silent. That's the lesson here. One person speaking truth can change everything." That evening, as the sun set over Jefferson County and the crowd slowly dispersed, Kesha stood alone on the courthouse steps. Agent Davis found her there, leaning against the wall where she'd sat bleeding 14 months earlier. "Thinking about that day?" Davis asked. "Always. It never really leaves me, you know. The moment of impact, the fear, the decision to keep fighting, even when every instinct screamed to run. Sometimes I wake up at night, and I'm back in that courtroom, and Derek Miller's fist is coming toward my face, and I think, what if I'd just walked away? What if I'd let them win? But you didn't." "No, I didn't." Kesha smiled slightly. "And because I didn't, 2,000 people got their cases reviewed. 800 got their convictions overturned. 67 people came home from prison who never should have been there. That's worth a broken jaw." "It's worth more than that," Davis said quietly. "You changed how America thinks about justice. You proved that corruption can be defeated, that powerful people can be held accountable. That's your legacy, Kesha." "My legacy is those 847 people who are free. My legacy is the whistleblowers who aren't afraid anymore. My legacy is every attorney who sees that plaque and decides to fight for what's right instead of what's easy." They stood together in silence as darkness fell over the courthouse. Somewhere in the building, new attorneys were preparing cases, new judges were reviewing evidence, new bailiffs were maintaining order. The system that had been corrupted was healing slowly but surely because people had refused to accept corruption as inevitable. Kesha's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "My name is Jennifer Lopez. I'm an attorney in San Diego. I just uncovered evidence of corruption in our court system. I'm scared to come forward. But I saw your plaque on the news tonight. I saw what you did. And I realized, if you could stand up in Jefferson County, I can stand up here. Thank you for showing me courage is possible." Kesha showed the text to Davis, who smiled grimly. "Here we go again." "Here we go again," Kesha agreed. But she wasn't afraid. She was ready. Because that was the thing about courage. It wasn't something you had once and kept forever. It was something you chose again and again, every time fear tried to silence you. And knowing that others were making that same choice in courtrooms and offices and communities across the country made the choice easier. The courthouse steps were empty now, except for the two women who'd fought together to expose the truth. Above them, the bronze plaque gleamed in the streetlight, a promise carved in metal that justice was possible, that corruption could be defeated, that one person really could make a difference. Kesha Washington had been punched in a courtroom for demanding justice. In response, she'd brought down an empire of corruption, freed hundreds of innocent people, and sparked a reform movement that changed the American legal system forever. The punch was meant to silence her. Instead, it became the opening note of a symphony of change that would echo through history. And that, Kesha thought as she walked down those courthouse steps one final time, was exactly what her father had meant when he said good people couldn't walk away from hard things. Because if they did, who would be left to do them? Not her, never her. She'd keep fighting, keep speaking, keep standing up for justice until there was no breath left in her body. That was her promise. To Jamal, to Lisa, to David, to every person who'd been failed by a corrupt system. To her father's memory and her mother's prayers. To the truth that had cost her so much but given the world so much more. Justice wasn't just a word. It was a promise worth keeping, no matter the cost. And Kesha Washington would spend the rest of her life making sure that promise was kept.